Blueprint for bosses. So, Tom, you're very welcome, and if you could step forward, it was a great relief to see you at the back of the room there. You're very, very welcome. Lovely to hear you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Are you set up?
What's that?
You're set up.
I think so.
Yeah. Good.
Am I all set? All right. I think it's on? Yeah. All right, so we're starting another session, part 2 from yesterday. And I'd like to believe my apology's still good from yesterday. So my same stereotypes and straight talk, we're going to keep doing that. And like I started yesterday, we're going to start today for those of you who are easily distracted. I don't know what that is on the bottom corner. The Raffle Rule. If you go to the charity events, maybe at your church, at your school, they have a raffle. But in order to actually win the prize that you were drawn for, you have to be present to win, right? So your presence matters if you're going to win at the raffle. I think that same raffle rule applies at work. In fact, I think it applies not just with your employees, but it applies with your children. It applies with your cows. It applies with your pets. It applies with everything. If you're going to have success, you have to be around. We all know those stories of the wayward kids because mom and dad were never around. We see the same thing when bosses aren't around. It's tempting to try to go off and do other things that are more exciting. So you don't find yourself managing your employees because you think they already know what they need to do. They just have to do it. You don't need to be there as a babysitter. But unfortunately, that babysitter role is part of the role of a manager. So being present, if you get one thing out of this whole thing today, the one silver bullet on being a good manager is being present. But actually managing, not just being in the office hidden away, avoiding all the stuff going on outside. Not just getting on a tractor, driving away, saying, well, I'm here at the farm, so that's good enough. That's more of a passive presence than an active presence. So one thing, if you can take away from this next hour, is you must be present to win, okay? So now I want to say some bold stuff about employees. I just listened to Ian and Carl, and they have so much information to share with you to bring back to your dairies. But all the work that you need to get done now with your preps, getting cows to milk out, avoiding bimodal milk, cows that are no longer lame, preventing that, maintaining it, you're not doing that work. Your employees are. My bold claim is that your employees are as important as your family. The two groups of people in your life, if you own a business, your employees and your family members are as important as each other. I know that sounds kind of crazy to say that your kids and your employees are on the same level of importance, but now think about this. The whole idea of running this business for your future is so you can spend time with your family. So how are you going to do that? Your employees are going to provide you that opportunity to spend more time with your family. So if we don't take care of your employees, how do you take care of your family? We've got to put priority and precedent with your employees in order to have that time that you really do value with your family. A lot of people think that I'm crazy when I say that, but I really believe that if those are your two subgroups, your banker's important, but not that important. I love it when bankers are in the room and I say that because I know who they are back in Wisconsin, and they just shake their heads. But it's true. Your employees are the ones who make your business run because they're the ones doing the work. And that's what we want to talk about today. You're no longer a worker. You're a manager. That's you out front. Chances are that's your reality right now. You're going uphill all by yourself trying to drag everybody with you. That's a long road to hoe, right? That's tough. Ideally, we're gonna take that slope and just make it a little less steep. We're not going to make it flat. It's not going to be downhill. When it comes with working with people, nothing's easy, right? So if we can get you and your best people out front, you've got your best 20%, your middle 70%, and your 10% laggers, you'll always have the people at the back hanging out, just maybe complaining, just maybe joking around, but you're not going to have everybody with you. That's the reality. And if the hope is that you're going to get everybody walking with you, I hope so. But I'm a realist, and I think this would be a real success right here. Getting most of your people in the middle working with you, supporting you, and only a couple people that you have to think about a little more often when things get hairy. So this is what we're hoping to do. Ultimately, when you're on that road, this is where you're going. You've got your goals. We talked about the pyramid yesterday, the results, the goals that you're trying to get. Your job is to make that road straight to the goal and keep everybody on the road. As hard as that is, that's your role. But nobody said managing would be easy. You're past that point. You have to be a manager now. And your job ultimately is to keep everybody on track with you, getting to that goal. So for me, the biggest challenge when it comes to people is finding balance. When I've had employees, I find myself on two extremes. I either turn into this hard ass, just this bully, because I get frustrated with what's going on. And then I switch all the way over because I realize that didn't work and I become their best friend. And I find myself going from bully to buddy. And it's really hard to get results when you're chewing everybody, always complaining and just becoming that heavy, hard-ass guy that nobody wants to work for or with. But you can't get any results when you're the buddy because they walk all over you. You're a doormat. So what happens? When you're the pushover boss, the good people get frustrated because they were going to do their jobs anyway. They didn't need to take advantage of you. The good people end up leaving when you're too nice to everybody else because the people then who are actually really running the show are the people who took advantage of you from the start. So you've got good people who no longer want to work for you because they're frustrated with all the dynamics, all the politics down in the trenches. So the good people leave, right? But if you start being a real jerk, everybody leaves. So which one do you do, right? Turnover becomes the biggest issue. If it's your employees leaving because of whatever reason, or if it's you that just wants to get the hell out, you no longer have this team that wants to stay. And one of the first things I tell my customers when I get that phone call, I never get the phone call because things are going well. It's because things are going poorly. And typically the first thing that we find out is turnover is a problem. And I start thinking, on what extreme are you working? Are you the bully? Are you the buddy? Because typically that's where one of the first signs of problems are when you have turnover. It's one of those extremes of where people are at. So the first three priorities as I'm working with customers are these three. We want less turnover, we need more compliance, and ultimately we need less headaches. It's that lifestyle, right? You don't want to be a slave to your company. How many people dread going to the farm every day? I have a lot of customers who really actually dread the whole employee interaction, the confrontation, just the dynamic that says, hey, I have to tell this person what to do, and I have to tell them that they're doing it wrong, and I don't know how they're going to respond. Will they quit? Will they just tell me off? I don't know what the response is going to be, and that becomes the problem. We avoid it altogether because we don't know what's going to happen next. So how do we fix any of these problems, especially the one with the headache? I have a customer who we're over it now, but this is 3 years when we started working together, maybe 4. He would literally go around the barn. He'd go around the barn and throw up before our meetings. It was that hard for him to confront his employees. Now he calls them, texts them, whatever the problem is, just tells them what we have to do, and he's over it. But he had no control. He had no system in place. He had no plan. So my issue is, if these are your 3 goals, if you're trying to get less turnover so you can actually train people, well, think about this. If you have turnover, how do you train anybody? How do you stop the bimodal milkings? How do you get all that procedural drift to come back to protocol? If every week you have somebody new. And maybe it's not that bad here, but when you have a team of 20, that last spot is almost a standard for turnover. But if it's 2 and 3 and 4 spots, how do you get any kind of compliance? How do you get any kind of consistency? And we all know what we need to do. For the last hour, you've probably heard a lot of that before, right? The importance of a proper procedure and a good milk out. But how do we actually get it to work? We count on the people. We need a strategy. So my question then for you is, do you have a plan? Do you have a plan with your people? What do you do to make sure that you can reach those 3 goals of less turnover, more compliance, and a better lifestyle? The quality of life thing, to me, still remains one of the top priorities. You're not doing this just for the money, right? I mean, it's got to be there, but you've chosen this career, it's chosen you, and you actually want to enjoy what it brings you and your family. Do you have a plan to achieve it? Most of us know that everybody at a dairy farm has a cow strategy. That's what we're talking about today, right? What are the 5 things that everybody talks about when it comes to cattle? We want good genetics. Nutrition is really important. Consistency in everything we do. Cow comfort is huge. You look at your facilities, find some inherent problems just by the design of stalls and pens and alleys. And finally, cleanliness is godliness, right? We're producing food. So those are the 5 things that we're always trying to achieve when it comes to managing cows. So what would be the 5 things that we have for managing people? What's your people strategy? Here are the 5 key principles that I preach with my customers. No one of these 5 are more important than the others. But I think if we don't have a couple of them right, none of them matter. And ironically, the first one, the clarify part, I think is where everything starts. It seems really simple that we should have some stuff in writing, but it's not that big of a deal because everybody knows their job. Who doesn't think that we've got a new milker who already knows, everybody knows what to do, we don't have to put it in writing? I hear that all the time from my customers. Well, they know what to do. They already know how to milk cows. And then you go at the first milking, and then you go to the second milking, and you see that they're not doing it the same. So if they know what to do, why aren't they doing it, right? And then you start digging deeper, do we have a protocol in place? Do we have any kind of standard that people can refer back to? And we find out we don't. So these are the 5 things I want to talk to you about today. These are the 5 things that I work with my customers all the time. These are the 5 areas that I think if we don't have right, if we don't focus on these 5 things, we can't do a good job of managing people. All right? So let's start with clarify. It's all about managing and clarifying expectations. A friend of mine, for his anniversary, he bought tickets for the Super Bowl for his wife. He was really excited because he was going to take his wife somewhere really great, really fun. She was excited because she thought she was going somewhere tropical and relaxing. They went to the Super Bowl. For him, it was a great vacation. Her expectations were palm trees and beaches. His was beer and football. The expectations are completely different. I see so many people coming to dairies over in Wisconsin with this idea that, well, this dairy pays this, and this dairy does this, and I figured you guys would be doing the same, and you guys would be doing... People show up with this idea that this is what you're going to do. Housing is a big deal over by us. I think a lot of dairy producers over in Wisconsin ruined it for a lot of other ones because they started providing housing right off the bat because they figured that's the only way they could get people to work for them. And now we've got people who literally could rent an apartment a mile away from the farm, and they're asking for free housing. They have this expectation that because I work at a farm, anywhere else, you could work at a gas station, they're not going to provide you a house, right? It started because we didn't have housing in rural Wisconsin for dairy workers. But as dairies got bigger and towns got bigger and more housing became available, we didn't really need housing. But the expectation now is you're going to have housing. So right off the bat, what I help my customers with is creating this package so new hires know exactly what they're going to get. They have an expectation before we get down that road and have to rewind and say, actually, we don't do that, and then they quit. Right off the bat, we say, well, here's what we offer. So it's very clear if you hire somebody tomorrow that this is what we do at this dairy. When they accept the position, they know that you pay this. You have intervals of evaluations and raises available for high-performing employees, and these are the benefits that come with it. I know in a couple of the areas here in the UK, there are actually rules about vacation. We don't have, at least in Wisconsin, we don't have a mandated vacation pay. Some of my customers still don't offer any paid vacation. A lot of them do because they need to be competitive with other dairies in the area and a lot of other employers. They're not just competing for dairy workers, they're competing with all workers, right? So in that regard, we have some differences. But the reality, regardless of where you live or what you're trying to do, we want to make sure that everybody knows what to expect so they don't set the bar this high, and then you came in thinking you're just doing what you always do, and you let them down. And then they quit because they're disappointed. So beyond the initial hiring expectation, we talk about roles and responsibilities. Who has job descriptions here? Excellent. Glad to see that. You guys are all dairy producers? Or you guys work in the industry? How about dairy producers? How many people at your dairies provide job descriptions for your employees. Few less hands, but still a decent number. Good for you. The idea on that is you know what the job is. You know what you need done. But your employees don't read minds, and often you're busy, so it's hard to explain everything that they need to do. So we put a list of roles and responsibilities for each position. The reason why that's so critical is real surface, right? It's they know what they need to do. That's the first and foremost, the reason why we have job descriptions. So it's clear that if I'm going to talk to you about your performance, I'm going to base it off of this job description. I have some customers who want to do employee reviews or even a raise. And I said, but based on what? Well, he comes to work all the time. I said, well, that just doesn't get you fired, right? I mean, that's just the price of playing the game. Okay, well, he's a friendly guy. He's always smiling. I said, well, I got ripped off by a guy who shook my hand with a smile. I mean, just because a guy is happy doesn't mean he's doing his work. What are we going to base this on? Because we need to have a standard for people who are going to all work under the same umbrella of expectations. So that's the obvious reason for having a job description. So people know what to do. So they know what you expect. And they can actually follow up and follow through with that. But the last reason here is where I've seen teamwork just completely torn apart is because people aren't doing their jobs. And then they say, well, I didn't know it was my job. So if we can make it very clear to people with their job descriptions and their job flow, their weekly flow charts of cleaning, who's got to clean this wall and who has to clean these windows and whose job is it to clean buckets after milking fresh cows. If we can do that, there's so much less bickering, so much less dysfunction in the team afterwards because everybody knows, well, yeah, that's my job. Without having job descriptions and standard operating procedures, typically teamwork falls apart because somebody passes the buck. I don't know that we all think this way, but one of the biggest mentality frustrations I have with the workers I deal with is it's kind of what my niece and nephews do. It's, well, she did it, but he did it first. And it's a cycle of, well, we didn't wash any colostrum buckets because they didn't wash any colostrum buckets. Well, when was the last time they washed buckets? Well, I don't know. We haven't done it for a week. And it started weeks ago, days ago, because it's this vicious cycle of, well, if they don't have to do it, I don't have to do it. And we go from day to day with that cycle. And if we don't finally hit the brakes and say, hey, look, it's your job. It's your job. You have to do it. We have no clarity on who's going to do it, when it's going to get done. And then we have more headaches trying to figure out how to manage this team. So without putting everything in order, organizing things in order to have some clarity for expectations and roles, responsibilities, teamwork typically suffers. And having to do these little teamwork exercises, I had one customer who said, hey, do you have any kind of, I don't know, role playing or any kind of exercise like catch me when I fall stuff? I'm like, what? That's just a joke. The guys don't want to play games. We just need people to work together. We need to enforce the fact that we've got certain protocols and work on that to build teamwork. From there, we have less people upset with their jobs. There's nothing worse than coming to work. A lot of these guys come to work, the first thing they notice is the work isn't done. For 8 hours, they're just pissed because people didn't get their work done. So for 8 hours, they're just fuming and just boiling with the fact that their coworkers just left them, whatever it is, a dirty parlor, a dirty kitchen, whatever it is they didn't do, that's what they think about for the next 8 hours. So if we're going to have a better workforce, a better, more satisfied, happier team, teamwork starts by starting to have some protocols in place. The next one is communication. How well do you communicate? Most of us aren't very good at it, myself included. I'll be the first to admit I'm a poor communicator. A couple of years ago, I was dating a girl for a few years, and she, all the time, every time I'd do something stupid, she said, I can't believe you'd get paid to do this. You're terrible at communicating. And I couldn't argue with her. We usually just ended right there. It's like, I got nothing. Because in and of itself, communication, we always forget something, right? We always forget one sentence to make it all come together. You're going to meet somebody at 8 o'clock. You forgot to say 8 at night, not 8 in the morning, right? It's just that one little bit you could have saved yourself the headaches. So the reality is I'm not here to tell you how to become a better communicator. I just have a couple tips because I struggle with myself. The first one is if you see something, say something. That's that whole terrorism thing, anti-terrorism, right? If you see something, say something. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a dairy where people say, well, he walked through here 3 times, never said anything. We just figured it was okay. Because you walked by it, you've essentially given tacit permission to keep doing things wrong because you didn't say anything. You were in a hurry. You hate confrontation. You figured, he knows what he's supposed to do. I probably just caught him in just a little slip up. But what happens is employees see that as permission to keep doing it however they were doing it. You might not even notice that they weren't doing it right. But because you walked through and said nothing, it's almost like giving permission to keep doing it that way. So what I tell people, whether it's good or bad, you have to say something. And that's the idea. Is it's really hard to go in there and say something about bad stuff all the time if you never say anything good, right? And I don't subscribe to the whole 3 for 1. Is that what everybody says, right? For every 3 things, for every 1 bad thing, you have to have 3 good things? Come on. Do mom and dad ever do that? If I'm doing 3 things wrong, you got to find 9 things nice to tell me? By the time we get there, I can tell you're bullshitting me from the start, right? I know it's not sincere. It's just you're working up to those 3 things you got to talk about. So let's not put these equations, these ratios, that you have to say 3 things nice before you can say 1 thing. Be honest. Everybody likes sincere, honest feedback. I can't tell you how many workers say, just tell me. Just what is it? Although they don't want to hear it, at some point they don't want to be pulled around, jerked around on that. They want to just be told. So when I have to have those conversations with employees, I usually say this. Look, I don't want to say it any more than you want to hear it, but here it goes. It sets the tone to say, look, I want you to get better. I'm not trying to pick on you. And I feel, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work that well, but I haven't had that many confrontations with guys when I started with that. Letting them know that, hey, I don't really want to say this. And I know you don't want to hear it, but we have to talk about it. With the whole point of this communication is to get things better. And we're going to get into the whole rapport before you can really shoot straight with employees. You actually have to have a relationship with them. We'll talk about that in just a second. But in all of this communication that you do, we have to be more specific, especially with the good stuff. If you walk in and tell your employees, good job, what does that mean? I mean, what are you referring to? And how do they duplicate it for you tomorrow? I mean, if the whole point of communication is to tell people what they're doing well and what they need to improve on, how do you actually identify what that is? Good job. I don't know what that means. Hey, I really like the way you clean teat ends when you flip the towel and you got right in there. That's going to help us prevent mastitis. Oh, okay. I'll do more of that. Okay, maybe they don't completely think like that, but the idea is if you're specific with, hey, those buckets look really nice, I can tell you spend some time scrubbing them, it's better than just, good job, right? So if you're going to give some sort of feedback, whether it's positive or negative, be detailed, be specific. It takes a little bit more, but it goes a lot further than just, hey, thanks, nice job. And what we really need to do is communicate so we get the results we need. Establishing those habits that we talked about yesterday, by having good quality communication, frequently, specifically. There's nothing worse than giving a review on one day, seeing some problems in a week, and say, we'll talk to him next year when we do his performance review. We can't let communication wait that long, right? If you're in a restaurant and you don't get what you ordered, how long do you wait before you tell them, hey, I didn't order this, right? At some point you have to say, hey, we got to improve this. Cows are getting sick. We got to pay more attention. This is what the problem. Specifically, tell people what's going on. All right, here's the part that nobody wants to talk about. This is my favorite part, actually. I'm an antagonistic kind of a guy. I could spend all afternoon talking about how important this is, but I won't. Nobody wants to really hear this. It's the fact that we don't connect with people. So many times a working guy just feels like a number. Going back to what we talked about yesterday, I don't expect you to understand how people think, but know that they have the same, for the most part, the same feelings we all have. Everybody wants to be appreciated. A few months ago, I was talking to a guy at a dairy, large dairy. He's a main manager, one of the best I've worked with in a long time. So he, in and of itself, educated guy from Mexico. He's an IT guy from down in Mexico, knew nothing about cows, doing a fantastic job managing this herd. we started talking about some family stuff with health, why I had to switch some meetings around, and I just alluded to my dad having some health issues. He said, oh yeah, I know what you mean. My mom's sick. I think we're gonna lose my dad soon. And we had this conversation we never had before. It gives me chills talking about it because I could see in his eyes that we're going through the same stuff. And I would imagine that everybody in this room has a story like that. An ailing parent, kids who are struggling with something, your employees are dealing with the same stuff. I'm not saying we have to pander to it. I'm not saying we have to be these soft-hearted people, but the fact is, your employees are dealing with some tough stuff just like everybody else. And if on some level you know who they are, beyond just milker number one, milker number two, like they're robot number one, robot number two, if at some level you know these people who make your business run, that makes your family continue on with the legacy that you're trying to build, if at some level they feel valued, they feel appreciated, they feel like they're more than just two hands working for you, they will give you the work that you're looking for. Good people want to be part of that. You're working with people. And as hard as it is for a lot of us guys to go in there and have those conversations, you don't have to dig it out. You don't have to go in there. But ask, hey, what did you do back in Poland? What did you study? You graduated. What was that? I know it's hard to do the whole language thing, but when people actually, you'll find it, when you're traveling abroad and you don't speak that language, you'll see how important it is to you to try to figure out how to communicate what you need to say. If they want to tell you about their families, if they want to show you pictures, they'll figure out a way because they want to share that. I can't tell you how many stories I get from guys when we're sitting in their employee reviews about what they used to do. A few months ago, young gal, we knew she was brighter than everybody else. There was something about her that just kind of shined. Turns out she has a law degree from Mexico. She's milking cows. A law degree. And we're just totally underutilizing this person, right? She could do so much more for the farm. So she is now, because we found that out. She's happier, she's more challenged, more satisfied in the role that she has, and the dairy is benefiting from it. And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to grow the dairy, we're trying to develop your business so you can reach your goals. Through that communication, through that connection, we're able to do that.
John, when it comes to connecting, in terms of maybe literature that you want on the farm that go through protocols, or whether it's mobility or locomotion scoring, whatever it is, in the language of the people that are working for you, how important is that for connecting?
We're talking about the relationship between connecting with communicating in somebody's native language. I couldn't imagine trying to read a poster in Chinese, Mandarin. Could you? Yeah, no idea. I can limp my way maybe through some German or some Italian. Spanish, no problem, because that's my second language. But if we don't have things in Polish or what's another, Russian, how would they know what to do? And if you don't care enough to translate it into their language, because that's how it's perceived, right? It's amazing when people see that you've just attempted. If you go to a foreign country and they see, I know as Americans we've got a really bad foreign stereotype as far as just being, well, you guys know what it is. I don't need to tell you. I can stop there, right? Yeah, we think everybody should know English. We think everybody should know all of our favorite TV shows. I know, I do too. It's just too many. There's just too much now. I know. When there were 3 channels, we were fine. You know, when they see that you've made the attempt at working with their language, as a white guy speaking Spanish to people from Mexico in these dairies, I get a couple extra bonus points just for that, because like, how did you learn Spanish? We don't expect that. So I get a couple extra bonus points just for being a white guy who went and learned their language, which gives me a kind of a free pass to make some mistakes along the way, right? So when you start making that attempt, whether it's in writing, whether it's some spoken Polish, Russian, whatever it is, they say, oh my gosh, this guy's actually, she cares. Took the time, the effort, the attempt to do it. You don't have to, but you got more to gain and more to lose than they do, because you're not going anywhere. And the next round of people probably will speak the same language as they did. So you can use it again. They might just go home and have no reason to bother. So yeah, putting things in a native tongue, I think, is a critically important detail. Ultimately, the idea is this: we want people to want to give it to you, whatever that is. I was in a conference similar to this. The speaker said, "Everybody raise your hand." I'm not going to. It's kind of corny. I don't do that stuff. But everybody raise your hand. We all raise our hand. He goes, "All right, as high as you can, right?" Okay, just a little higher, and we all did it again. He said, "Why didn't you do it the first time?" I told you, raise your hand as high as you can the first time, and we still had more to give. We all have more to give. Every one of us could give more. Why would you want to? When your parents call or when your grandparents call and they ask for a favor, absolutely. If it's somebody you care about, well, maybe not all the time, but when it's somebody you care about, you always do something extra for grandma. Because she's been doing that her whole life for you. You want to give something back, right? Your employees, although you pay them, they still need a reason to want to. And that's the thing, we tell people what to do. Sometimes we don't explain why it's important. So as long as you're standing there, they do it because they know what to do. But the second you leave, they have no good reason to continue doing it that way. That's why I think telling people why is so important. But beyond that, communicating the why it has to be done, basically so we ensure that it gets done when you're gone, when you're at home sleeping. People still have to want to. I can't tell you how many times it's easy to just take that shortcut and just say, we'll rinse the bucket, we won't sanitize it. But if they realize that this is the boss's future, the calves, and I want to be here, and my family works here, and everybody realizes that we have to count on this dairy and the success and the health of the animals, they have a reason to want to. But the reality is, employees don't see their bosses as equals. In fact, you're not, but the problem is they see you as the rich guy. Whether you feel like you are or not doesn't matter. They see you as the guy who's just getting rich off their back, off their labor. And I'm not for a second am I going to start going down that road, because I think you own the business, you took the risk. By no means am I going to stand here. I'm as diehard of a capitalist as anybody else. But that's how they see you. And every time they are working for you, they know that they're making you rich. And on some level, if you haven't connected with them, it bothers them. So why should I help? It's the question, why should I help you when you don't help me? And if we can eliminate that, and that's coming up next, if we can eliminate that gap in thinking, because we're not going to change it in the structure of their business, by no means, but if we can eliminate that thought process of, I don't want to help my boss get rich off of my labor, that's what we need to do. So let's talk about that. I'm going to jump forward and talk about it now. Let's talk about money. I know there's a big difference here between countries because of some laws. Lots of laws. Every state in the U.S. is different. We've got a federal minimum wage, $7.25. I don't know a single dairy that even comes close to that. We're talking $10 an hour to start. Okay, so we're not paying. This isn't about cheap labor. Okay, but here's what it boils down to: is we're all competing for the same people. At some point now, we've crossed the line where we have way more supply of jobs than people. So workers they're in the driver's seat now. They know that they don't even have to do their jobs many times because they can't get fired. There's nobody else to bring them in to be replaced. So that's our reality. We have to pay well right now in the U.S. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm just saying it's the reality of our marketplace. Okay, and I think you guys are dealing with a little bit of that too, right? Especially on a local level, you're not getting people applying for these jobs. That's why you're looking to immigrant labor. Same here. Of all my dairies, I work with 30 dairy clients, and only one of them has local help. And that's a challenge. It's a different challenge, but a very similar process that we're going through. But the first thing, when it comes to recognizing people, we've got to pay attention. We've got to pay attention to see what's going on. That's why I say you have to be present. How do you know who to pay and how much to pay them? Is there a difference? In the U.S., at least with my clients, we differentiate quite a bit. Okay? It's like remember when you're out on the playground when you're a kid and you're picking teams to play football? 2 captains, I pick you, I pick you, I pick you. I always wanted to be the captain because I didn't want to be picked last every time. It's just smarter to pick the teams as opposed to wait till the end. But it was the same kids picked first, and it's the same kids picked last. In fact, the last kid nobody wanted, he could have just stood there, and often he did. But that's why nobody wanted him. The reality is there's a difference in your employees. You know your best cows based on whatever you want to use best for, production, repro, whatever you want to, however you want to gauge it. But you know who your top players are, right? You know who your top people are. Do you pay accordingly? I mean, if I'm the guy that does everything wrong, do I make as much as the gal who does everything right? Because if I do, I think it's great. She thinks it's horrible. And what happens, I've set my bar down here, and she keeps working at this level. At some point, what is she going to realize? She doesn't have to do that. So because we don't make a difference, we don't pay, we don't recognize according to performance based on a meritocracy, we've got this really good milker who, well, she gets frustrated, right? And what does she do? She takes her performance from here, where we wanted it, and realizes that it doesn't pay to do all the work that you keep asking for, because you're still going to pay the same if she makes it down, if she falls all the way to this level. So she starts realizing she doesn't have to be on time. She doesn't have to follow protocol. She doesn't have to write anything down, because this guy doesn't either. That's what happens if she stays. Most of the time, your good people get frustrated and they just leave. And what are you left with? A lot of lazy guys right here. So if we don't make an effort to notice and to do something about what we see that's different, we end up with everybody's leftovers, the people that nobody else wants. And we didn't start with a real plethora of people to begin with, right? So that becomes our issue. So when it comes to pay, we've got to pay attention. We've got to pay our performance. We got to recognize performance. The other thing, though, is we have to recognize with things that aren't just money. By me, one of the things that are kind of a popular thing is gas cards. Because gasoline, well, I don't know if it's compared to here, it's probably not. It's actually probably cheap. No? Are you? Very cheap. Yeah, we're paying $3.50 a gallon. Right? You guys are what, 5?
3 times that.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I guess that's why you would need solar. Solar energy is going to be popular here, right? Fracking? Good. Well, I don't have a solution for that. But so what we end up doing is a lot of guys will just buy gas cards and keep them in their office, trying to recognize guys just kind of on a surprise basis. But even then, we're still doing some sort of monetary reward. I go back to people saying, hey, look, you can recognize somebody with a thank you, with a compliment, because those are free. And when was the last time you gave a compliment? Okay, I'm going to ask you guys. When was the last time you gave a compliment to somebody? You don't have to raise your hand. But when was the last time you heard one? We're not very, at least in my family and country, we don't give a lot of compliments. I almost think they're pretty scarce. But if you don't do a lot of that, if you don't pat a guy on the back once in a while, start. Compliments are free. And I tell you what, it's even more rewarding to write something down, just a really brief note. I still have some old cards from teachers of mine. You kept those things, right? I mean, that was a big deal. A teacher actually wrote you a little note about something you did. I still have those from when I was in grade school. I don't know where they are, but I know I still have them. But because of your status at your company as the owner, your correspondence, your compliment carries a lot more weight. And you don't have to be an ass kisser about it. You don't have to just gush all over somebody. Just an honest, hey, thank you. That was a huge help, the way you wash buckets for everybody, because we weren't going to get out of here in time. Just whatever it is. Just a a genuine handshake, look a guy in the eye, and say thank you for whatever it is, specifically thanking them. Or a compliment about how clean they left the parlor. We're trying to build habits. We're trying to get people to do what's right over and over. And if we can do a better job of rewarding people with that, you'll find you don't always have to pay more just to keep a person. I was looking at a study, who was showing me a study just the other day that was in a magazine that, this was here in the UK. The employees were asked what number from 1 to 10, what's most important. Pay was like number 5, and the dairy producers picked at number 1. Okay? But if you don't have pay right, you can't do anything else. I tell everybody there's a baseline. If you're paying underneath that baseline, all the free hamburger from all those all the free hamburger that you give your employees doesn't pay the bills. So you can't think that, hey, we'll pay a little less, but we'll give them all the milk and meat for free as they want. We still have to pay a decent wage. But if you do that, you'll find all these other things really do matter.
I just want to, from an employer's point of view, if pay is number 1,
Yeah.
maybe that's the easiest thing for me as an employee to say, I'm sorry, but I've been offered something with more money.
Yeah.
Rather than get into the detail of the real problems on the dairy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I look at it even a little, I think the reason why we think it's number 1 is because we are so focused on financials, right? I mean, think of, yesterday I showed the 1, 2, 3, the person at number 1, number 2, number 3. Number 3 is motivated, or I shouldn't say motivated, but challenged with their numbers. They want to hit their numbers. They're numbers guys. So if you're a numbers guy, you see it all through the game of numbers, right? Business is a game of numbers. Money's how we keep score. The managers, I think, are challenged, are moved with achieving goals. They love the challenge. Give me something to overcome. And the worker, challenges are just more work. Basically, here's another 100 cows. How much time do you need to get those milked? So they see it as something totally different. So when we start applying our way of thinking to theirs, we don't always resonate. We don't always connect. And I think the money thing is the easiest thing. I mean, guys, try giving your wife money for your anniversary. I guess that's when they say it's the thought that counts? No? Apparently we're supposed to be thinking a little better than that, but it's easier to just hand somebody some more money than it is to walk over and actually create a relationship and give them a reason to care. And I think most of us guys, we'd rather just do the easy, well, all of us in some level, right? But in this regard, paying more money seems like an easier solution than having to go through all the sticky, mushy connect stuff that I think most of the workers are lacking. All right, the last one, I'm going to kind of go backwards on this, is manage. I know I seem like I'm just beating a dead horse, but most managers don't manage. You got into the business because you like cattle. You're a cow guy. In fact, you love working with cows. At no point did you really say, if I get in this dairy business, I could have a lot of employees, and then they'll do the work. Hell, I like doing the work. Why do I have to let them do the work now? This is what I like to do. There's nothing worse when I see a guy who's basically being paid to do CEO type level jobs, doing entry level work because he likes to do it. If a feeder gets paid, I'm just going to throw out a number. This is really low, but $10, $15 for feeding cows. This is back home. Okay, so $15, right? So why is a manager who makes $100,000 a year feeding the cows, you'd hire a guy $15 an hour to do it? Because he likes to do it. But that's not good for his business. I have another customer who, they're recording this, I better be careful. But I have another customer who has 3 sons. One of them loves to cut brush out of the tree lines. All winter, he'd take a chainsaw, mix up gas and oil, and he'd go out there and just cut brush all day. But he likes to get paid as if he's an owner. He does $8 an hour work. Another guy loves tractors. In fact, the more new tractors we can get, the better. That's the success of the dairy. So we have shiny green, right? Well, good for you. You have no idea how to run the dairy. One of the brothers is finally stepping up and saying, if something happens to Dad, nobody knows how to run this business. The problem is, let's just say the one brother doesn't step up, and maybe I'm going to step on some family toes today, and that's okay. I'm leaving in 2 days. If something happened to Dad in this dairy right now, they have no management succession plan in place. I mean, they do. There's 3 guys. One of them is getting there, but they really have nobody to manage the dairy. They're all busy doing other things. It's not that they're not doing stuff. They're busy working, but nobody's managing. Dad's so busy running everything that he can't manage the details. So I kind of know how much people are making because we've talked about it. One guy's making about 80,000, another 90. Based on what they're doing, they're all pretty much in the same boat. With this team of sons and dad, they've eaten up all their management budget, their overhead. So if they had to hire a manager, where would that come from today? I mean, if you're going to pay, I'll just use real round numbers, 100,000, 100,000, 100,000. Dad takes 60 because he doesn't need 100. He says, I've never needed that kind of money, so he's fine. But what would you do? Where would you come up with the budget for a manager? Because now you need one. If you've got family members who are doing worker level work, taking a family owner wage. And I think that's a real problem when we don't have managers, but we're paying them to be managers. And what I tell people all the time is managers earn their keep by their ability to run a team of people. Think of a welding team, guy who goes out welding. Best welder in town. He hires 3 people. He still loves to weld. He's got 3 guys on the job, and he's got his helmet down, and he's sitting there putting gates up. 2 of the guys are smoking a cigarette. The other guy is checking his phone. He's still the best welder in town. The problem is he's got 3 guys who aren't worth their salary, right? So he's got a team of people who aren't very good. He's still the best welder in town, but who's managing? He's only as good as his team of 3. And as a manager at your dairy, you could be literally the best cow guy in your town. But if none of your employees can help you get the results from your cattle, what are you? As a manager, we've got to focus on getting results from our people. Otherwise, you're just a really good taskmaster at what you do. If we're going to implement all these things that we hear about today, somebody has to bring them home to the dairy. A good friend of mine down in Mexico, his dad he's retired now. He's a CEO of a spark plug manufacturer down in Mexico City. He'd go back to Detroit a lot for meetings with the big 3. And he would come back, and he said, the biggest challenge for me was to take the message I got from Detroit, from their customer, bring it back to Mexico City, and get it through the whole channels. He said, but when I could do that, when I could speak the language of the person in front of me, and they all spoke Spanish, not the real language, I really communicate and really get that message across, my team was so much better, not because of me, but because I gave them all the tools they had in place to do it. And that's where your success really is going to be, not just because you're a really good cow guy. It's because you had 3 people, like this welder, you had 3 people who are also good welders, or 3 people who are also good with cows. If you're just honing your skills, you're really just an overpaid employee. If you can really transfer those and work with your people, you become a really good manager. And in all of that, as we really become a manager, we show people what to expect every day. Most of your employees want predictability. I think I mentioned that yesterday a little bit. The more consistent you are, showing up, being a manager, they will see that when you walk through, your expectations, you're checking up, following up on your expectations, and your expectations will actually become reality. And every day they'll know what to expect from you. They can set their watch to the fact that you will be predictable, and they'll know every day what they need to do. So it brings us to the end. The 5 key principles. If you're going to be good with your team, if you're going to truly be a good manager, we can't ignore any one of these 5. We can't get too heavy on connecting. We can't get too heavy on pay, because everything has to have some sort of balance. But if you're going to challenge yourselves to do one or 2 of these things, I'd ask you to work on the clarification part. Get your systems in order, build some structure, because if you want to avoid being the bully, and if you want to avoid being the buddy, you need to have a plan to follow. And you'll find that instead of emotionally reacting in one way or the other, you just say, hey, I've got a plan. In cooler times, we made a plan. We're going to clarify our expectations. We're going to communicate on a regular basis. We're going to have people that we actually know their names and something about them. We're going to, from the start, we're going to know how we're going to pay, and we're going to stick to that. And we're going to manage consistently. If you do those 5 things, you don't have to vacillate from one end to the other, trying to find your ground. You've got a big team that's going to count on you to make things happen. You can do it. You can build your team. Managing is like so many other things you're picking up here today. It's a skill. If you take the time to learn it, if you take the time to actually do it and practice it, it's a matter of just doing the work day after day, being a manager. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Tremendous. I mean, as a follow-up to yesterday, just a great talk, and we're very, very grateful and that Tom's taken the time to come across to the UK for the Large Herd Seminar this year, and so thank you very much indeed, Tom. It's been
You're welcome.
Great, and everything that people have said is just tremendous. Are there any questions for Tom before we break for tea? Anybody got a burning question? Yes, sir. Please. Oh, bear with me. Sorry, I will remember.
Hi, Tom. Do you feel as though cameras could play a role in being present, or not?
Cameras. I like cameras. Years ago, I thought they were a bad idea because I remember working at places as in college and whatnot. I didn't like them then, but I've come to terms that it's a reality now. If you're on the camera bandwagon, or you're on the fence, I should say, I'd say do it unequivocally. Go for the cameras, but only if you get a good system, one that you can use DVR and internet connection, because the whole point of the camera is you're trying to watch things when you're not there, and you're going to want to watch it not in real time. You want to be able to record and watch it when you can conveniently watch. So that might be at home or in your office from an internet connection, DVRing through the night shift or a certain day because of certain things. But only if you're going to use them. Think of all the things that you see at these shows or you hear about, and you think this is going to be our solution. You spend the money, you put it in, and then you never use it. I can't tell you how many people have ellipticals and treadmills in their house, and all they do is hang up their pressed shirts. I mean, don't buy stuff if you think it's just going to be there sitting collecting dust. I think go for the cameras. Have a good enough system that you can utilize. But now you're going to have to tell your people why you have cameras, right? So what's the message? What I tell people is, look, I'm not going to I swear too much. I'm not going to try to sell them a lie and say that we're not going to watch for bad stuff. I tell them, yeah, we're going to do that. But here's the thing. This is to really know who's who, because we're not here all the time. And if you're doing things right, and we know people are, because we are getting good results, but there's some things that don't look right. We want to just know who those people are. And the people who are doing things well, who have a legitimate gripe for why you shouldn't put cameras in, all of a sudden sit back and say, yeah, you know what? Put those in. Because I know who it is, but if I rat them out, I'm going to have to deal with it back home or with my slit up boots every morning. So the good people end up realizing that it's a good thing, and the bad people realize that working night shift isn't such a good deal anymore. Because a lot of the people who are your connivers are usually saying, hey, can I work at night? Well, there's a reason they want to work at night, because there's no bosses to watch them, right? So if you can sell it right, the other reason to sell it right is to actually use those cameras for training. What we do at a lot of meetings, I work with my customers every month. We do a monthly meeting. Because it's on the calendar, people feel obligated to actually keep the schedule, which is good for me, because business would suffer if they canceled all the time. But it actually puts them on the hook to actually do the meetings. They don't just blow it off and say, we can do that another month, we can do that another week, and it just keeps prolonging. But at those monthly meetings, if you have those team meetings, actually queue up that footage. But I tell everybody, okay, put your time code down as you're watching it, so you know what you want to watch. Put a little smiley face or a frown to let you know right off the bat if it's good footage or bad footage, and then put a little note what it is. Not following protocol, hitting a cow, letting cows out without milking them, whatever you're going to find, write that little note. And then in the meeting you watch it, and you don't even have to say anything anymore. It's great. You just put it up and you just watch it. And everybody sees what you're watching. And now there's not the, I didn't do that, because it's right there. Ironically, there are people who will still deny that they did it. But most of the time, you don't have to have that argument. You don't have to go down that road.
Thank you very much. Good question. Please, sir.
You told about the wages in America,
Yeah.
the minimum of $7, and the dairy industry is paying more than 10.
Yeah.
What about the competition with other industries? Are they also paying more than 10? Or
No, okay, so to give you a little, and I can really only speak of Wisconsin, because every region, every area is going to be a little different. Fast food workers make minimum wage. They'd pay them less if they could, because they're probably worth $4. I have this thing that minimum wage is just, if you could pay them less, that's probably what they're worth, but because we can't pay you any less, this is what we have to give you. So McDonald's, on the other hand, seems to still, I still like McDonald's. They still seem to, whether they hire minimum wage or not, they still get the work done. You can tell the other places are struggling because they have poorly qualified people. So fast food is your lowest paying jobs. Dairy is up there with a lot of competitive wages. Construction tends to be the highest. Okay, so it might be 7.25, 7.50, 10, 14. And it's because there's money in construction and the work's tough. And it's seasonal in Wisconsin because we can only pour concrete so many months out of the year. So there's such a forced, hey, we've got a timeline only, or a window this wide, we have to get it all done. Because dairy is year-round, we actually kind of can, I think we'd have to get to 14 if it wasn't, just because we don't have the supply. But there's a lot of people who don't go to construction jobs anymore because they just realize those rain days just aren't worth it. So because of the stability in the dairy industry, we can sit around that $10 mark. But just to give you a range on wages, the bulk of my customers are somewhere around 9 starting, I'll just use that for a round number, going up to $12 an hour. And what I tell, and tomorrow if you're in the workshop, what I tell everybody is we want to have this predictability out front. That if you start as a milker, you can go from $9 to $12 in the course of this long. And we set it out, we show them the map. If you want to make more than that, you got to learn another job. And if there's an opening, an opportunity, an assistant herdsman role, that goes from 11 to 14. And then a lot of guys say, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in learning that, or I just don't want the responsibility to be on the hook for that. And you say, and that's okay if you change your mind. We'll work with you. We'll train you. But if you stay milking, you're going to be capped off at 12. And when they realize that that's the reality, some accept it, and others realize that it is a dead end. They want to learn more skills. And it's amazing how at the beginning it seems overwhelming to take on that role, and then eventually they say, you know what, I think I can do it. And then they go for the next tier. So it's all in design, and that's what I want to talk about in the workshop. If you design your pay system, your scale right. Now, I know you guys have certain mandates that we don't, but I'm going to talk about what we do back home, and hopefully you can apply some of those details to your dairies here.
Thank you very much indeed. Is there, just one more question, please. Thanks, Warwick. Oh, two, okay.
Thanks. Tom, in terms of remuneration regarding salaries or hourly pay rate for labourers, what's your angle on that? Do you prefer the hourly rate, given the problems with actually controlling that, how many hours people do, and their desire to just work overtime if it's available? Yeah.
So my general take is this. Not everybody can handle salary, okay? I remember the days when I go home early. I remember the days I stay home late. I can handle salary because I know it's a give and take. A lot of people forget the days they went home early, and they remind you of every 15 minutes they stayed extra, right? So my deal is, for most laborers, they can't handle salary. I know that sounds, again, I made my apology earlier. I don't have to do that again today. But most laborers can't handle salary. Pay them hourly. But now some people say, yeah, but they're going to game it. They're going to just milk the system, putting in more hours, and we're going to have to pay all these hours. If you've got an employee who's going to game you either way, right? You got the wrong employee by changing. I had one customer who said, well, we're going to have to switch back. So no, you got to switch people. You can't change your system because your people are broken. Now you're going to break your system to fix your people, when ultimately you just have the wrong people in those positions. So my deal is pay hourly, but then structure it. So what I'll do with the customers is say, okay, we're going to have a 6-hour milking or a 7-hour milking, and then we're going to have 1 more hour of cleaning. And we're going to specify in the morning on Mondays, we're going to clean this, because we know that takes an hour. Well, 45, whatever it is. But you know, and then everybody knows that on Monday, this is my job. Milk all the cows, get all the cleaning done, go home. Then we can control the hours a little better. And even then, we've put in some systems, some punch in and out systems that say, okay, it's an hourly pay. You got to be done from, you start here, you finish here. You're gonna get 8 hours and 15 minutes. It starts looking like a salaried system, but wink, wink, it's an hourly system. Okay, we're gonna pay 8 hours, whether you work 8.5. It's gonna be 8 hours. If you stayed longer, and this is what works really well, if you stay longer than your 8, we need you to write down, and we have this little form that I created in English and Spanish. Write down why you stayed late, how long you stayed, and then bring that over to your manager to sign off on it. If it's legit, they'll fill it out, bring it over, get it signed off, and there's no problem. If they're just playing the game, those sheets never get turned in. That policy alone has saved customers of mine $10,000 to $20,000 a year, just because we said, okay, here's how we're going to manage this. These are the jobs, extra, to get your 8 hours. But if we go past this, it's got to be justified and approved. But going back to your short, simple question, stick with hourly. He's more. Yeah. And I've run across a lot of employees like that. We just keep challenging them to manage their time better. Because a lot of times does working slower make you a more thorough worker? I've watched some people, I always use example to the Mexican workers. Back in Mexico, you go to these little street vendors, food vendors. If you don't get sick, definitely give it a try. It's great food if your stomach can handle it. But they work fast, they do a great job, and it is clean. I joke about getting sick, but they tell me that, hey, if we work fast, the job's going to be terrible. If we work slow, we'll give you a good job. That's not necessarily the case. I've seen a lot of fast milkers with low hospital pens, with low somatic cell count, and it's not because they're fast, it's because they are thorough, they figured out how to do it. I think you just have to keep working with that person and try and identify where they're losing time, because typically it's a time management issue, not necessarily that they're slow, pokey, off-track employees.
Thanks, Tom. Was there one quick question, did you say? All right, yeah.
The Forbes last year came out and did a study on the best jobs to work in. Dairy workers became 199 out of 200, just ahead of an oil rig worker. How would you improve that position?
That's a very quick question. Yeah.
That's the almost second from last? Well, I don't know. What would you do? You know what? It's interesting. Back where I live, the guys who work at dairy farms work at dairy farms. If they're not working at yours, they're working at the neighbors. I have this belief that people who love cows, and they're going to work in the industry, whether it's going to be on production side, on the farm, or on the industry side, wearing khakis, right? Somehow you want to be in the industry. And the laborers, at least back where I'm from, they just go from farm to farm. So my deal is, if we know that people who like to work with cows, just like lumberjacks like to work in the woods, right? That's where they belong. They love it. Cow guys are the same way. If a guy's going to work at a farm, let's make him happy to work at yours. Help him become a lifer. Give him all these systems where they can say that, you know what, if I'm here 7 years, I can still have a family. I mean, I'm not going to get rich, but I still have a pretty decent lifestyle. What I'm trying to do with my customers is help them create a system that their employees can look at and say, I could do this for a while. Maybe not 20 years. Ideally it would be. But if you can put together a system where a guy can say, from here to here, I can do this, and still have a good living, I think I don't know. If it was 35, would we feel better about it? I mean, would everybody would say, oh, okay, well, our problems are solved? I think the ranking, yeah, it means something. But I don't know that your employees know that it's 199 because every day they show up anyway. You know, they don't bring that study to you and show, look how bad we're at. This is miserable. They still show up for work. I don't know how we improve it, but just I think on an individual basis, what can you do to make your dairy a good place to work? That's the question I'd rather answer.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much indeed. And I think it's testament to everybody here that actually everyone wants to improve it, the environment the employees have. So thank you very much for taking the time to be in the session, for Tom leading it as well. So thank you very much indeed, Tom.